Welcome. I hope you are having a wonderful night, dear viewer. Tonight, I will be telling some terrifyingly scary stories. Make sure to leave your feedback on the comments so I can make this the best experience for you. And if you have any stories you would like me to tell, you can send them through the link in the description. Let's begin. I live in a small town, the kind where everyone knows everyone, and nothing much ever happens. The biggest attraction in town is our local department store, a multi-story building filled with clothes, toys, and everything in between. The store is also home to a collection of mannequins, used to showcase the latest fashion trends. I visit the store almost every day, a routine formed out of sheer boredom. It was on one of these visits that I first noticed something odd. The mannequins, which usually stood in generic static poses, were different. Their positions had changed, their plastic hands gesturing, their stiff bodies leaning towards each other, as if in conversation. I brushed it off, assuming the staff had moved them. However, the next day, they had changed again. This time, their poses were more elaborate. They were no longer just standing. They seemed to be interacting. Their plastic faces turned towards each other, their arms extended, as if frozen mid-action. Days turned into weeks, and the mannequins kept changing. No 2 days saw them in the same pose. They started mirroring everyday activities. One day, they'd be huddled around like they were at a party. Another day, they'd be positioned as if playing a game of charades. Then, the mannequins started to get personal. One day, I walked into the store to find them mimicking a scene eerily similar to my morning routine. The mannequins were gathered around a mock kitchen, one pouring a non-existent cup of coffee, another reading a paper. It was unnervingly similar to what I had done just hours before. The following day, they were mimicking my office environment. Mannequins sat behind a desk. Others stood as if discussing a project. Each day that passed, they got more accurate, more detailed, as if someone was watching my life and directing the mannequins to copy it. I tried telling people, friends, family, even the store staff. They laughed it off, attributing it to coincidence or an overactive imagination. But I knew what I was seeing. Things took a terrifying turn when the mannequins started to mimic not just my past, but my future. I walked into the store one day to find the mannequins gathered around a hospital bed. I laughed at the absurdity of it until I got a call later that evening. My mother had been rushed to the hospital. Since then, every scene the mannequins pose for happens in real life. A birthday party, a car accident, even a funeral. I'm scared. I don't know how this is happening or why. I don't know who's orchestrating this or what they want. I don't know if I'm being warned or threatened. But the worst part is the uncertainty. Walking into that store each day, not knowing what I'll find, what glimpse of the future I'll get, not knowing if I'll see a scene of normalcy or a premonition of disaster. I'm terrified of the mannequins, of their silent, frozen figures. I'm terrified of what they might show next. But most of all, I'm terrified of the future they predict. Because today, I walked into the store to find the mannequins mimicking a scene of someone being murdered, and the victim looked disturbingly like me. This story is about a bad experience I had when I went camping on the beach in the summer with my boyfriend. We had the idea of camping on the beach instead of going to a hotel, as I'd always wanted to sleep and hear the waves hitting the shore, see the night sky whenever I wanted, and experience this at least once in my life. We were supposed to stay in our tent for a week. The area had public restrooms with showers and restaurants, so hygiene and hunger were not an issue. We bought all the supplies we needed for the adventure: a blacked out tent, an inflatable mattress, a first aid kit, lanterns, and more. The first few nights went smoothly, and we enjoyed every moment. We always carried our valuables in backpacks, just in case anything happened to our tent. There were other people camping in the area, including singles, couples, and families. but no one had caused any trouble. At night, we would occasionally hear people laughing, partying, and indulging in various activities. It didn't bother us since everyone seemed to be having harmless fun. On one late night, around 1 a.m., we decided to explore the lively streets, listen to street performers, and grab a bite to eat. We stumbled upon a street performer with a crowd gathered around him, but in the midst of the crowd, there was a middle-aged woman dancing naked, clearly under the influence of alcohol and/or drugs. She was behaving erratically and exposing herself, despite the discomfort of those around her. We didn't dwell on it and returned to our tent to enjoy a quiet drink under the stars, falling asleep to the sound of the ocean. However, we heard a woman shouting in the distance. It was the same woman we had seen before, now accompanied by friends. They had set up camp a few tents away from us. They lit a fire on the beach and continued drinking, smoking, and dancing. The woman was still naked, but wearing a see-through skirt. She even went into the ocean, seemingly unaffected by the cold. My boyfriend brushed it off, advising me not to engage with them so they wouldn't bother us. I followed his advice, but I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. Despite my concerns, we decided to leave the tent slightly open, only zipping the mosquito cover to let in fresh air and wake up to the morning sun. I'm not sure how long I had been asleep when I was startled awake by footsteps circling our tent and a woman humming a soft song. The tent was thin enough to hear everything outside. I was too afraid to look out, even to change my position. I lay there, peering through the mosquito cover. Suddenly, the footsteps stopped above my head and the voice whispered, "Don't be afraid. I only want to sing you a lullaby." The footsteps resumed, circling the tent. I caught a glimpse of her feet passing by, noticing familiar long see-through skirt trailing behind her. The next morning, we quickly packed up our tent and moved to a different area of the beach, as far away as possible from that woman and her friends. After my Grammy passed away, back when I was in middle school, my grandpa came to live with us. My mom, stepdad, brother, and me. He lived with us until he passed away when I was a junior in high school. He passed away in the house, and a lot of strange things happened after that, when we still had his ashes for some time, because we were trying to get the whole family together to go lay him to rest at his favorite lake. But that's another story. So skip forward to the year 2017. My daughter and I were sleeping in my parents' bedroom as they were out of town, and they were the only ones with an ASCII unit in their room, so we were taking advantage. It was a normal night. I had work the next day. My daughter had school, so we were already in bed. My brother was also still living there and was home at that time. Around 11:00 p.m., I hear someone banging the kitchen cabinets very loudly. I mean loud enough to wake me up. And I remember thinking, geez, why is my brother slamming things around in the kitchen like that? This continued for some time, things getting banged around very loudly. But I was kind of in a sleep fog, so I just went back to sleep. The next morning, I get up and right away, I think about how weird all that was last night. As I open the door to use the restroom, my brother opens his door at the same time. His room is right across a very small hallway from my parents', and we both jumped and scared each other. I ask him immediately, "Hey, why were you slamming things around in the kitchen last night?" He responds with, "I was about to ask you the same question." So we were like, "Ong, that's freaking weird." But remember, I said a lot of strange things happened after my grandpa passed, so we shrugged it off, but it was still very weird, especially after I checked the kitchen, and it looked completely normal. So I'm driving to work, and I get a call from my uncle, and he tells me that my cousin has been struck by a car last night, and he did not make it. Of course, I was shocked, and I called my other cousin, his sister, and went straight to her house. I asked her, how did this happen? When? She replied that it happened around 11:00 p.m. last night. Same time all that happened in our house. We like to think it was our grandpa trying to wake us up, to let us know that one of his grandkids was in trouble. I don't know. just too strange to be a coincidence. I've been reflecting on my childhood. There's a trauma-shaped hole that incessantly niggles away at my mind. I remember deeply disturbing bits and pieces from my time in the red playroom, and that only makes me fear what I've suppressed. I only ask whether any of you had such a room at school, because I read something online that seemed eerily reminiscent of my experience. It made me think that my school's perturbing playroom might not have been an isolated anomaly. Unfortunately, I was right. I hosted a few friends at my house this evening, and most of them laughed at my seemingly odd question, but Sarah didn't. Her saucer-eyed face trembled as she nodded slowly. She and I went to different schools, so that only confirmed what I had always feared. The red playroom was not a figment of my imagination. It was more sinister than I thought. And believe me when I tell you that what Sarah and I experienced was already sinister enough. Do you want to talk about it? Sarah asked after the rest of our friends had left. I nodded. It's all I've been able to think about this evening. Who goes first? She gulped. You. Let me summon the courage. At my school, the red playroom was a dreaded place. None of us wanted to play in there, and the teachers never even told us about it. We just happened upon it. Wedged between a storage room and the far wall of the school, there was an inconspicuous door. Did this used to be here? Tim asked, pointing it out during our lunch break. He opened the door to reveal a small box room, 10 by 10 feet, with bright red walls, gray carpet, a tiled ceiling, and horrid fluorescent lights. There was an assortment of various toys on the floor and the detached hood of a yellow floral coat. We should go and hand it in to Miss, Stacy chirped up. Tim thumped her in the arm. Snitch. Don't ruin this cool little hideaway by telling the teacher that we're in here. I don't like it, I said. It's too bright and quiet, Thomason whispered. Good. Tim laughed, bounding into the red room. I don't think we should go in there, Stacy said. Well, go away then, Tim snorted, turning to me. Jake! I begrudgingly stepped inside, not wanting to have my cool card revoked. The carpet felt too soft beneath my feet. That's a weird comment to make because I was wearing shoes, but it's the only way I can describe it. Everyone other than Tim seemed frightened. Being the boisterous leader of the group, he had to appear unfazed. But I always wondered whether he secretly felt what I know the rest of us must have felt. We didn't belong there. But that didn't stop Tim from taking us into the red playroom day after day, week after week. We just sat and talked, pretending not to be terrified of the uneven place. Tim said it was a great room for just getting away from people. I think he wanted to seem tough. Tough enough to handle the horror. One day, however, some new toys appeared. Look at this cool thing, Tim laughed, picking up a small ball with a smiley face on it. Buck the Chuckler, its tag says. It's horrible, Thomason shuddered. Nah, he's smiling. He's friendly. Tim smirked, preparing to throw Buck at Thomason. She winced, and Tim cackled, placing the ball back on the floor. I rolled my eyes at her, drawing circles in the air around my ear to indicate what I thought of Tim, and she giggled. What's that one? Stacy asked, pointing at a small figurine on the ground. Tim picked it up, and we gathered around to get a better look. It was a plastic man dressed in a green, hooded raincoat. At that moment, the bell sounded. Come on, I said. Let's go. As we entered the classroom, something caught my attention. Why did you bring that with you, Tim? I sighed. My friend grinned, stroking the figurine. Nobody's gonna miss him. Yes, they will. You're gonna get in trouble, I said. Whatever. Tim shrugged, fiddling with the figure's limbs. Probably gonna chuck it anyway. His arms and legs don't even move. He's not an action figure, Delmars, I said, rolling my eyes. On the way out of the classroom, Tim threw the figurine into the bin, much to my annoyance. I wanted to fish it out and put it back in the red playroom, but our teacher was standing nearby, and I didn't want to incriminate myself. So I left it. And I wish that'd been the end of the story. But the next day, Tim was pale, faced and fidgety. "What's up with you?" Thomason asked. Tim asked, absent-mindedly. "Nothing. "Wanna go to the red playroom?" Stacy asked, attempting to sound braver than usual. "Nah, that room's lame." Tim shivered. Yet when the girls moved out of ear, shot, my friend leaned over and whispered something unnerving. "I saw the green raincoat man in my room last night." "What are you?" I began. But I was interrupted by the lunch bell. That was when something happened, which shattered my town for years to come. As I was walking to the main school building, I noticed that Tim had fallen behind me. When I turned to face him, however, he was nowhere to be seen. Search parties worked tirelessly over the coming weeks, but the boy was never found. That was 15 years ago, and his parents still long for answers. They're never going to get any, because nobody would believe the truth. When I ran into the building to seek help, the door to the red playroom was gone, and I started to convince myself that I'd imagined the entire thing. I think Stacy and Thomason did the same. As I say, there are blank spots in my memory, but I'm sure our fear of the room stemmed from things we'd seen and heard in there, terrors that I've suppressed. I instantly knew the playroom was to blame for Tim's disappearance, and on the final day of primary school, 2 years after Tim's vanishing, I finally had confirmation. I was alone in the corridor, and I heard a creak from the far corner by the storage room. The door to the red playroom had reappeared, and when I tentatively pushed it open, I found myself facing something haunting in the center of the carpet. 2 figurines, the green raincoat man and what looked like a miniaturized version of my best friend. Whilst screaming in disbelief at what had become of Tim, I suddenly found myself in a deeper spiral of horror. The carpet began to tear, and long arms emerged through the floorboards. A life-sized version of the eerie raincoat figurine. The slim man looked at me with a face too smooth and featureless to be real. Like the figurine on the floor, he seemed to be composed of plastic or resin. As his spindly fingers shot towards me, I screeched, fell backwards, and slammed the door on his arm. But his fingers curled around the edge of the door, and I prepared to join time. At least he won't be alone in that evil room, I thought, frightfully sobbing. "Jake!" Miss Hall shouted. Hands pressed on the door. I spun to face the frowning teacher in the corridor, and just like that, I realized my mistake. The woodwork vanished from my fingers, and when I turned to face the wall, it was just that. A wall. I visited the school numerous times over the past 15 years, but the red playroom has never reappeared. Tim is lost forever. After I finished speaking, Sarah's face was completely frozen. "It's okay. You don't have to tell your story," I said. She shook her head. My friend did have a story, but she didn't tell it in words. She told it by slowly pulling a hand out of her pocket. "This is Jennifer," she whispered. Sarah revealed a figurine of a small girl with a yellow floral coat.